Well, that ended up being actually more fantasy productive than I actually thought it was going to be. We had some decent games from some guys. We'll get to the fantasy analysis. Obviously, we're going to cover the game. I just want to say, as a Steelers fan, even though the Steelers lost tonight, which I had predicted ahead of time, I was really entertained. Like that game turned pretty entertaining, and it was awesome to see old-fashioned AFC North football. Like in the snow in Cleveland, the snow's coming down, and both these teams are just they hate each other. And the Browns earned that one. I mean, the Browns, they almost browned it away. No doubt about it. They almost browned the ball away, and they almost lost that game, but they ended up winning. And I would say that they earned that game right there. But Pickens getting into fights with fans at the ends, like it was chippy throughout the game. Like that game was that was an entertaining game. So obviously we're going to recap it all. Like the video, subscribe to the channel to show your support. And let's just start out with the Steelers side of the ball right here. So Russell Wilson actually has a much better game than I anticipated he would have. Now, this is something that I had discussed before game time when I was saying, listen, with the Steelers and the Browns, these are two teams. We knew this game was going to be bad weather. These are both teams that are well adjusted to this type of weather right here because they practice in it. They play in it. This is year-round. This is not a coincidence that it snowed tonight. Like, that's just AFC North weather right there. I was kind of curious to see how Russell was going to handle it because even though he came from a rainy area, Seattle, the game's rain, he didn't struggle. Like he didn't have to deal with any snow over in Seattle very much, but he didn't struggle really. You know what I mean? Like he actually looked pretty good. Almost had 300 yards passing tonight, and he ended up getting a touchdown. So it ended up being a pretty solid game, I would say, from Russell Wilson. It wasn't obviously anything fantastic. Like, I was kind of straying people away from playing Russell Wilson. But I think with Russell Wilson, like, in the future, moving forward, like, he's got a lot of AFC North football left. That's the one thing I will say is if you take anything from these last 2 weeks, Ravens last week and the Browns right now, understand he's got a lot more AFC North football to play. So, against the Bengals, I do think that in particular against the Bengals, Russell will end up playing pretty well in fantasy because he's going to have to keep up with the Bengals. The Bengals are absolutely going to be a team that's going to struggle. Or they're going to struggle against the Bengals because they've got to throw to keep up. So with the Ravens though and the Browns, like those might be two uglier games that Russell just doesn't do much in fantasy in. Now Jaylen Warren ends up being better than Najee in fantasy. Najee was actually pretty disappointing tonight. He had some open holes, and, I think Najee struggles with vision, to be honest. Like, some games I just come out thinking, man, I don't think he sees the holes that are there. I think that's a problem with Najee Harris. Jaylen Warren is obviously the more explosive guy, and he gets in the end zone tonight. And the reason I said Jaylen Warren was playable is because I figured this would be a game where they ran the ball a lot. I mean, between the two of them, that's 27 rushes. Between just the two of them. And then you get Justin Fields in on a couple package plays, and he runs the ball 3 times. That's 30 rushes, as I kind of predicted tonight for the Pittsburgh Steelers. But Jaylen Warren, moving forward, I would say it's probably going to start going back to what we saw last year. Really the last 2 years for the Steelers, which is that Najee is not a very high ceiling play. Najee is like a bottom-end RB2, like / flex play. And Jaylen Warren is getting back to that same tier. Like, Jaylen Warren's obviously had some issues with health and some issues with just being available. And so we haven't been able to get this type of game right now. So I just think that, Jaylen Warren at the end of the day, he's kind of in the same tier again as Najee. It reminds me very much of last year. Tonight reminded me of last year for the Steelers. So I think that Najee goes back. Like, obviously, I overranked him way higher than I should have this week. But, in reality, Najee and Jaylen kind of just go back to, like, being lower-tier flex, lower-tier RB2 / flex options moving forward. And then with, the receiving options, Pickens obviously has 4 catches for 48 yards. There was a play tonight, and this was by the time, like, if you didn't watch the game, I think you should have. Like, this was an entertaining game just from a football fan's perspective. Take fantasy out of it, this was actually an entertaining game. In the second half, it started to really snow hard. Like, the first half, it was snowing, and you could see it coming down. But the second half, it just turned into a different ballgame. Like, the snow was like, the vision of these players. And like of us watching from home was like, oh wow, like it is snowing so hard there tonight. And there was one point in the second half where Pickens had his guy beat so bad up the middle of the field. And Russ was just like not on the same page. Like Pickens had beaten his guy so bad, and then he realized, like, I don't think he even saw the ball. Because the ball like ended up like way to his, to his right. And he was just looking to continue to keep moving. Well, Russell wanted him to stay vertical rather than get, further down the other end of the sidelines. So, Pickens had room for more, which is why I'm not too concerned about Pickens, because he's obviously still the number one. It's not going to be a problem with snow every single week. But I will say that sometimes this is what you're going to get from Pickens, because he's not like, they still don't use him as a total full package like possession receiver. That's still not his game yet. So with Calvin Austin, I just think that, Austin's kind of moved into like potential flex territory, because every single week he does have a role. He does have a role every single week. Whether they hit him or not is the question. Like Calvin Austin is a shorter version of an Alec Pierce, a Jamison Williams, a Quentin Johnston, where like they use him on big plays and like deep balls. And, tonight they did hit. They hit him, one time over the middle earlier in the game, and then they also hit him for a touchdown. Russell Wilson hit him. So it's like, I guess you could throw Calvin Austin in moving forward as like a boomer bust flex option. I'd ultimately just still prefer guys like Quentin Johnston, Jamison Williams over him, because they just hit more often. You know what I'm saying? So I just think that honestly, Calvin Austin is really nothing that you need to like really consider as a flexible option moving forward, unless you're really trying to take a shot big, because he can do this sometimes. Pat Freiermuth ends up having a decent game. 4 catches, 59 yards. Like, there were several, the good thing about this one was that there were several moments in this game where Russell like would be looking for him over the middle of the field. And Freiermuth, like, this is kind of the most involved I've seen him with Russell Wilson. Like, Pat Freiermuth actually had the majority of his best games this year with Justin Fields. And this was the first game that I really felt like Russell Wilson was looking Pat Freiermuth's way. Like, take it from a Steelers fan's perspective. Like, I'm watching the Steelers every single week very closely. And I watch every game every single week. But the Steelers I definitely pay special attention to. And Pat Freiermuth, a lot of times, like, he's been overlooked. And it's kind of just been the George Pickens show with the occasional Calvin Austin play. Right now, like tonight, Pat Freiermuth was definitely more involved. Like I said, this game was a little bit of a throwback to last year for Pittsburgh, where they were doing a lot of shorter passes. You had some occasional deep balls still from Russell, but there was a lot of split between Najee and Jalen. There was some, plays to Freiermuth over the middle. Like they made a concerted effort to go ahead and get Pat Freiermuth involved in this game. Do I think it's going to continue to move forward? Honestly, I think that Pat Freiermuth is still a middle tier tight end too. Like, that's kind of how I think of him, because like he's not getting targets at the goal line. And Darnell Washington, Mount Washington is what we call him in Pittsburgh, because he's huge. He's enormous. Darnell Washington is still very involved. Like, he still gets targets, and that takes away from Freiermuth's production as well. So, I just don't see Pat Freiermuth as much more than a desperation tight end play a lot of the times, personally. Like, this week it made sense, right? Like, tons of bye weeks this week. The matchup was fine. I think it made sense to play Freiermuth this week, but moving forward, when you got everybody, healthy and active, not playing Pat Freiermuth. Now let's go to the Browns side of the ball. Jameis obviously turns the ball over. That's what Jameis does. It's like at least once a week, and it wasn't just the interception. He got a blindside sack, and he fumbled on it. Like, so Jameis Winston ends up playing pretty bad in fantasy. This is the problem with Jameis, is like he's bound for at least 1 to 2 turnovers per week. It doesn't matter who he's playing. Now, the Steelers defense is obviously much better than most defenses in the NFL. So in this type of matchup, AFC North football, when it's snowing, like, Jameis Winston is going to have time securing the ball. So Jameis did, and that's exactly what happens. And this is why I don't think you can play Jameis very much. Like, if you're in a super flex league, or you just are in a super deep, like 18 to 20 team league, playing Jameis makes sense. But like, unless you're in that desperate time, if you're in a normal 12 team, 10 team league, Jameis Winston really doesn't have any business sifting your lineup. He doesn't. So I don't think anything changes from tonight. Nick Chubb, welcome back. It was awesome. Honestly, 20 carries. That's what I predicted potentially could happen tonight. I said this before the live stream, or I said it before the game. I said, listen, I think that Nick Chubb might end up getting 20 carries. Because what I read before the game was that Kevin Stefanski, the coach, said he had 11 carries last week, but I kept saying, like, 4.5 yards per carry is what he got us. So that was actually a pretty good performance. And what Stefanski said was we limited his work on Sunday because we knew we had a short week coming up. We were playing the Steelers. So that told me a couple things. Number one, they were saving him for the Steelers game. And number two, I believe they were saving him for this game because it was a little bit of a revenge game. Not that, like, Chubb never played for the Steelers, obviously, but Minkah Fitzpatrick last year was the guy who tore Nick Chubb's knee up. It wasn't a dirty play or anything like that. I'm sure Nick Chubb doesn't like that, though. So Nick Chubb ends up getting in the end zone twice. Now, he was still inefficient. That is still a problem. He only got in because they were at the goal line. So that's still an issue here with Nick Chubb. And ultimately why I don't think that we can look at Nick Chubb as a plug and play. Like, I'm not looking at this game and saying to you guys, yes, Nick Chubb, back in your lineup. Like, back he goes. It's not like McCaffrey. Nick Chubb is still coming along. This was the best game because he got in the end zone twice. When it comes to efficiency, this was by far not his best game. This was actually one of his worst games of the year. So, matchup dependent is still what Nick Chubb is, and you know, coming off a long week, like in week 13, maybe he gets this amount of volume again, because Jerome Furrow just isn't very good, so they want to use Nick Chubb. So ultimately, Chubb is definitely flexible every single week. You can have confidence at least considering Nick Chubb in your flex spot. That's the way I feel about Nick Chubb. Let's just see how this one keeps going. Do not look at him as a plug-and-play player. Jerry Jeudy was still the number one wide receiver. Maybe Cedric Tillman's time is done. I will say Cedric Tillman did leave the game early, and he got like basically almost knocked out. Like, Patrick Queen delivered a shot on him, I think in like the third quarter or something like that, and he got back up. Like, he kept running, but he went down and like they were going to commercial break, and you saw him stumbling with Jameis Winston. So I was like, okay, well, that's the end of that. Like, we're not going to see him again tonight. And he also fumbled in this game as well. Yeah, maybe Judy's the number one. I mean, maybe that's what we're looking at. Because Jeudy did pretty well. Like, 6 catches, 85 yards, and he was definitely the number one target, even when Tillman was there. So maybe what we're looking at here is Jerry Jeudy's the number one, and Tillman is the number 2. Now, I want to say this with Tillman. I don't think that you need to drop him just because. Like, Tillman is still, like, a flexible player, I believe, moving forward. Again, keep a couple things in mind with Tillman tonight. I'm not trying to make an excuse for him. I'm just, like, saying that this was a short week, ugly game. Like, as far as weather goes, it's tough to play in this kind of weather. So I'm not looking at this and saying, like, Tillman's a must drop. Like, keep your head on a swivel here. If Tillman provides you more upside than an option on the waiver, but you want to drop him to make a statement, like, that's just not a right move. Now, if you have a guy like, like Quentin Johnston on the waivers, like, that makes sense. Like, drop him for Quentin Johnston. I don't have a problem with that. Because QJ is the number 2 in Los Angeles, and it's been working on a weekly basis. So it just depends, but I do think it's clear that Tillman is the number 2, and Jerry Jeudy is the guy that you want. Jerry Jeudy, as far as where it puts him, it may very well put him in like mid-tier wide receiver 2 territory moving forward. I mean, if he becomes their clear number 1 for the foreseeable future moving forward, this guy could potentially be a league-winning player. Like, honestly. And the problem is, like, I don't think he's on many waiver wires. I don't remember what his roster percentage is, but I don't think he's on many waiver wires. So, Jeudy definitely is an interesting play moving forward. He could very well be a league-winning type of player. And Jordan Akins, my God. That tight end, the tight end situation tonight was unbearable. because there were so many points. Like, especially as the game went on and it was like snowy and it was harder to discern like who was who. I kept thinking like Jordan Akins was catch a ball and I was like, oh, way to go, David Njoku. And it's like, where is he? Like, what are they doing with Njoku? And he was like used as a decoy tonight. Like, the Steelers definitely were like scheming to stop him. There's no question about that. The Steelers 100% schemed to stop David Njoku. Now, again, if you didn't watch the game, you may not want to go back and watch this because Njoku dropped the easiest touchdown pass of the night. I mean, it was bad. I mean, it was going to put them up 17-6, and it was like so easy. Now, they ended up getting it on the next play. They went for it on fourth down, but if they were going to score with Njoku. Like, that's how I felt about it as an Njoku owner and someone who played Njoku tonight, was with David Njoku, like, it couldn't have been an easier ball. Like, he was wide open. The ball was, like, right here. And then he proceeds to make one of the hardest catches of the night on a 2-point conversion on that drive. Like, he got, like, the hardest catch of the night, and he brought it down, and he landed, like, flat on his back. So I was like, man, like, Njoku obviously busted tonight. Don't think too much of it. Like, Akins, I think that this was a totally game plan thing. Like, the Steelers were trying to scheme him out of the game. I fully believe that. Like, every time I watched him, he was being doubled. Like, or like made sure there was a careful handoff of David Njoku when it was a zone scheme. So I don't worry about David Njoku too much in particular right here. And yeah, I mean, other than that, Boswell missed a kick early, but he ended up doing fine throughout the rest of the night. Still wasn't a great game, and hopefully that'll show you why I don't just auto put Boswell into the first tier of my kicker rankings when he's got a matchup like this, where it's like super snowy. Like, he doesn't belong there, you know? And then both defenses had their moments, you know? Steelers obviously gave up 24 points, but they had several turnovers. I think they had 3 total turnovers tonight. And the Browns ended up, you know, doing what the Browns usually do, which is like just kind of mediocre defense. Like the video, subscribe to the channel to show your support. I want to go through something here I saw from Live Creation. Live Creation said, that was not what I was expecting for a Thursday night football game. It was kind of an instant classic. You see, I was actually watching the game and thinking, like, this feels like a classic to me, sort of. But, you know, just, I guess, based on the fact that the Browns are, like, out of playoff contention, it doesn't mean that much. But, I mean, that was a great game. Like, I truly enjoyed that as a football fan. Like, I watch football from multiple different perspectives because I love this game and I can. Like, on one hand, I'm a Steelers fan, and it stinks that they lost, right? So I was annoyed by that. On the other hand, as a football fan, this was a great game, especially in the second half. It became an excellent game to watch. From a fantasy football perspective, some wins and a lot of, like, L's in fantasy football. So, you know, I just think that ultimately this was a great game to watch. I really did enjoy that. And he also said it was the most entertaining game I've seen this year. And I would say it was a good one. It was a good one. This is kind of where you find out if, like, you know, everybody has their own style of football they like the best, for sure. Like, for me personally, I grew up on physical AFC North football. Like, I got Jack Lambert on the wall right here because I grew up on physicality. Like, that's the football that I played when I played. That's the football I watch, like, when I grew up, and that's what I love. So when I get a game like tonight, it does throw me back. But I also enjoy shootouts, too. I love this game. I love this game. Love you guys for being in here tonight. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys on tomorrow's videos. Peace out, guys.